Hello everybody, welcome to another video of mine. My name is Chris and this is Barn on 11970. And as you could see here, I am showing a live chart of the Dow Jones Industrial Average as of 1:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And as you could see, it's down currently about 84.8 points and decreasing. It's kind of evening out at this point, but what happened with China yesterday should send a message to a lot of people out there who take things for granted that everything is always going to be fine, everything is always going to be the way it is, things can't change. Now, I've talked about for years on this channel, and even the channel before this, I used to have a channel, Barn on 11967, which I took down because back then I let some of the negativity affect me enough to shut it down, which I regret. But I've talked about gold and silver. Also, I talked about how to prepare for things, not out of fear, but out of precaution. I mean, that's pretty much why most people have car insurance. It's not because they're afraid of getting into a car accident. The same thing with homeowners insurance. You don't buy homeowners insurance because you're afraid your house is going to burn down or get robbed or have a flood. You're buying it just in case if that ever happens, you'll be protected. So it's not always based on fear, even though if you watch these kind of videos, you're going to be surrounded and almost flooded by a lot of fear. Because the way to keep people grounded is to scare them. Because then you tend to look outside yourself for help when you're afraid. You don't look inward, which is where your true power lies. But for years, I talked about gold and silver in a way to protect yourself. Well, part of a way, anyway. Now, is that the ultimate best monetary system? Of course not. But it is a lot better than this paper or this soon-to-be digital world where they could just write a number on a screen instead of having to go out and pay people to go find the specific metals, manufacture them, refine them, and distribute them and store them. But until the masses of people stop settling for their measly little scraps that we get dangled before us, things are not going to change. So sometimes you have to make the best out of what's available, and you have to be realistic. Because sadly, more people know more about Joe Namath's all-time passing record than they will anything about the law. Until that changes, things are not going to change in the way we would like. So I know there are plenty of people out there that'll say, oh, well, you don't really want gold and silver because it still helps the higher-ups, which I agree, but it makes it more difficult for them. And until the people decide no more, well, we have to have something. So sometimes you have to have the lesser of evils. I'm not saying to settle, but like I said, and I'll say it again, until the people go from doing nothing or just pretending it doesn't exist to actually changing it, we're never going to get what we really want. I mean, everybody would love a utopia, but how many people are fighting and doing their best to get it? We're settling for the crumbs that they throw us. But the whole thing about what potentially could have happened yesterday with that market, let's say they couldn't get it under control. Or let's say tomorrow more people start to panic. When something happens, it happens almost instantly. So yes, in life you can dodge bullets. But if this doesn't show the potential of how quick things can change, because just imagine if people woke up today and the Dow Jones was down 1,000 points. You don't think the rest of the world would start to panic? You don't think they'd start selling as fast as they can? You don't think that would affect the world's markets and continue to spiral down to the point where, what if the Dow Jones shut down and it continued? That drop would be catastrophic for the world. And people would many people would lose their life savings because some people put their life savings into a paper scheme. And that's what this stuff pretty much is, either paper or digital at this point, which means they don't even have to spend money on paper. And just imagine if you lost everything, what do? What if it affects the dollar? What if the dollar was to crash? You don't think that would affect the rest of the world? I mean, considering most of the world is buying up our debt, I think they'd be pretty disappointed to find out that they loaned us all this money that we use to buy whatever it is that our government buys, whether right in front of us or in secret, and they got dollar bills and they don't have the same value as they once did. You think they're going to be happy? Why do you think China is building cities that no one's living in? They're building them quicker than people can actually live in them, because that's saying something about the currency that they have. They're saying that they don't trust the lifespan of the dollar. Now, that doesn't mean it's not going to rise again, and it might rise for a while. We may have a couple of years before anything can happen. But can anybody name me any currency throughout history that has lasted the test of time? There is none. They all fail. Because remember, the British pound was the world's currency for about 200 plus years. So they can last a little while. But how many of you that are listening to this right now are using pounds to buy whatever it is you're about to purchase or going to purchase in the future? How many of you are using the Roman dinar? I think that's how it's pronounced. Forgive me if I get it wrong. I probably did. But my point is, currencies, the way they are created, are always doomed to fail because it all comes down to greed. And eventually that greed gets to the point where it can't be hidden anymore. It can't be disguised. The idea is to be prepared for that day. And again, it's not about fear. It's about being one of the people that doesn't have to worry the next day. I mean, look at what happened with Hurricane Sandy. Hurricane Sandy was a storm we had information about a week before it ever hit most people. You had plenty of time to prepare. And look at the damage it caused and how much it inconvenienced people's lives. Some people to this day are still feeling the effects. I remember when Hurricane Sandy was over, there were lines of people at gas stations because not all gas stations had power to be open. So people would sleep in their cars overnight. There would be car lines miles long. There were stabbings. There was fighting. There were people looting. And that was just a storm that we had a week or so advance notice about. There's an old saying that says if you don't research history, you're doomed to repeat it. So I'm not saying this was the event. That's why I even said yesterday, I'm not saying that's going to be an event, but it should be an eye-opener of what could happen and how quickly it will happen if it does. And if you're one of those people that has been mocking something like gold and silver, for example, for years, and then all of a sudden everybody rushes to it and you don't have any, who do you think is going to have the last laugh then? And again, I'm not saying gold and silver is the answer, but it is the answer in this world of people who are not willing to do anything other than watch the television and read the latest Hollywood gossip magazines. They care more about what's in fashion than they do what's in the law, which is disappointing. So those of us who research these things, you have to have that reality check. Yes, we wish we could live in a utopia where everybody had equal shares of everything and everybody lived happily ever after and everybody had what they wanted and you could push a button like on the Jetsons and all of a sudden whatever you want materializes out of thin air. That'd be perfect. But we don't live in that world, at least not yet. And until we do, nothing's going to change, so you have to make best with what you have. And that's why precious metals, real estate, and other investments that have physical value, you're exchanging your currency, which could potentially fail, for something that is tangible. Because in times of crisis, trade is an amazing thing, an amazing ability to have and to utilize. So it may not happen tomorrow. It may not happen in a year. It may take 10 years. But if that day comes and you're not prepared then and you had 10 years to prepare, shame on you. And again, don't do it out of fear. Do it because it's better than the alternative. Because I would rather have stored up some food, water, supplies, things like that, gold and silver, and be wrong than to have not had any of those things and be wrong. Who do you think would suffer more? Because that gold and silver, even if I lost 90% of it, I could still get some of the value back for it. The food and water, I can consume it. But if I didn't have any of those things, then all of a sudden the ball did drop. And I no longer had access to those things because my currency did not retain the value it once did, or the banks shut down and kept all of the money. I'd be in a lot of trouble. And sadly, if that was to occur at this point in time, if tomorrow all of a sudden everything, the stock market just collapsed and everybody went into panic mode like they did back in the Great Depression, it'd be a lot worse than it was back then. Because back then, people used to grow their own food. They used to farm. They had the ability to sew their own clothing. They could take care of themselves better. Nowadays, everybody relies on the push of a button to click on something on their cell phone or their laptop to get any information they want. And even with that, they don't even utilize it to the proper extent of research or just improving their lives. What do you think the average person these days would do if all of a sudden technology went down? And that doesn't have to be some nuclear war or some scary event. It could be something as simple as a storm. So my thing is to get people to be aware of situations, because you could live on the bottom of a hill, where at the top of the hill there's a dam, and that dam is pretty well constructed and has been there for 100 years. And you notice a couple of cracks, but people say, oh, well, they keep fixing it, don't worry. And underneath that dam could be the most wealthiest property on the planet. And you're one of the people that owns that property. And you see the writing on the wall that that dam could potentially crack and break. And if it does, everybody down below is going to drown and be destroyed. And you could sit there and say, oh, well, you know what? I'm going to sell. I'm getting out of there because I just don't like what could happen. And everybody else could sit there and say, oh, you're crazy. This is the prime real estate and you're giving it away and you're moving on something that hasn't happened. That dam has been there for 100 years. You're crazy. And you might move away and your friends might mock you and tell you, oh yeah, the house that you sold, it just doubled in value. And it could take 5 years, maybe 10 years. And then one day you turn on the news and find out that the dam broke and everybody in that under that dam in that valley drowned and lost everything. Now, what do you think would happen to the person that opened their window that morning to see the water rushing towards them? You think they'd get away? Or do you think they'd be seeing what's about to smack them and end them? That's how things happen. So it doesn't matter if a person lived there for 90 years of their life. It's that one moment that changes everything. So I hope people become more aware of that and protect themselves. And I'll say it again, not out of fear, just out of precaution. Better to be safe than sorry. So what you do with this is up to you. I'm not here to tell anybody how to live. I'm here to give suggestions, but it's ultimately your decision on how you want to live. If some people want to continue to mock me over these things and talk about how gold and silver is at all-time lows for the past 5 or 6 years, I'll tell them you're very right and congratulations on your negativity. But if 5 years from now, all of a sudden gold is 10,000 an ounce and silver is 200 an ounce, which I'm not saying will be, you think I'll be caring about the years when they were making fun of it being down? So anyway, that was a dramatic pause, I guess. I appreciate everybody that takes the time to listen. I thank you, and I wish you all nothing but the best. I hope you make right decisions, and most of all, pay attention. That's important. Those who pay attention, those who research, those who have a general idea of what's going on are going to have the better chances of getting away from that dam before it breaks. Nothing lasts forever, at least in this materialistic world. Anything beyond that, I mean, who knows? But at least in this little lifespan that we have, in this little planet that we live on, not many things last forever. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.